The big story of yesterday, though, Logan, was not really about basketball. It was Draymond Green getting ejected yet again for effectively throwing a punch at Jusuf Nurkic. A very strange interaction where Nurk is guarding him out of the post and he's doing a little tugging on his jersey, and Draymond tries to make it look like he's just flailing because of the contact, but it's pretty clearly a targeted swipe at Nurk's face at the very least. Just a totally unnatural movement. And this just continues a trend of Draymond doing these out of line physical acts and getting himself thrown out of games, getting himself in trouble at a rate that we haven't seen even in his career, although that has been his reputation. So what do you make of that?
I understand setting the tone, man. There are guys that you need in every sport to set the tone. You know, you kind of sometimes you like those guys. Pat Bev, the little irritants, man. The enforcers in hockey. You know what I mean? Sometimes you need guys like that to pick at the other team. And Dre's been really good at that, man. He can play head games with the best of them. But when it's reckless, when it's costing your team, when it's a 3-point loss, and like Steve Kerr said after the game, we need Draymond. Draymond helps us win games. I mean, that's a difference. I mean, there's a fine line between, again, setting the tone and directly costing your team and hurting them deliberately. Again, when we look at this actual play, I don't understand what Dre's doing. Like, did you really expect you were going to get away with that? I mean, he full on just discus punches Nurkic, man. He had a WWE move on homeboy. He was trying to hit the finisher, knock his ass out. To quote Jusuf Nurkic, that brother needs help. That was a funny-ass quote, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, man, I understand the guys that you need, man. The Rick Mahorns of the world, the Charles Oakleys, the press some buttons, but it's just gotten to the point where Draymond is directly hurting the team, and he's a valuable asset. He's shooting the hell out of the ball this year. He hasn't been as good defensively, but he's still a great defensive weapon, you know? So it's got to be frustrating. And again, this is a Warriors team that, I mean, has not looked – the benches look good. All the top dogs outside of Steph have failed to pull their weight. Wiggins, Clay, Dre, and after this, because, I mean, this is following, like you mentioned, a double-tech game in Cleveland where he shoves Donovan Mitchell. This is following, where he puts Rudy Gobert in a freaking chokehold, man.
Yeah.
The only question that popped in my head at the end of this game, Carson, was, is it time to blow it up? Like, is it time to put this thing to rest? I don't know. Like, is Dre getting frustrated with losing? Does he hate Nurkic? I don't know, man. It's got to be frustrating as a Warriors fan, man, because this team is too talented and has such a great track record. But I just can't get out of their own way. I don't know what it is, man, but we were talking about the ship sinking in Golden State, man. This is there's a lot of weight pulling the boat down right now, man. A little more drama to add on top.
Well, you certainly can't blow it up because you have to make the most of Steph's window. There is no way that you are going to get requisite value on the open market for Draymond, and he is still invaluable to this team when you consider the elite defense that he has consistently made them when he is on the floor, and the fact that when he's off the floor, they haven't been very good there at all. When you consider how he conducts the offense, his playmaking, his IQ there, he is having a career shooting season. That to me is a total non-starter, right? There are other dudes who are playing poorly enough and who aren't as essential to the core construction of this team where you can talk about moving them. Draymond, it's a non-starter, but this is inexcusable. And you talk about needing the enforcers, needing the antagonists, needing the irritants. That's what's so strange and unique about this situation is this is not one of those. This is a no ambiguity, clear cut. He just totally started and finished this himself. This isn't Sabonis maybe tripping him right and it's a play where he could get injured and then stomping on his chest. Absolutely out of line, excessive, but provoked. This isn't him putting Gobert in a chokehold. Absolutely excessive. How long he held on to that for, excessive. But that's in the middle of a legitimate scuffle in which Gobert is holding his other teammate, Klay Thompson, and maybe he doesn't have a great angle on what's happening, right? Those are situations where he's escalating where things have already started to go south. This, I mean, it's not even a foul on Jusuf Nurkic, dude. He's just literally tugging on his jersey a little bit as they're grappling for position. And that's what's so inexcusable to me. That's what's so mind-boggling. That's not him going at the opposing team's best player and trying to get in their head in a calculated way. That's literally him just, I guess, overcome with frustration and willing to take himself out of a basketball game just to let it out. And that is such a negative for this team because, Logan, you mentioned the Kerr quote about how they need Draymond out there. They absolutely do. Like, him getting thrown out of these games, him getting a 5-game suspension is having a very negative impact on this team. The Cavs game, from which he got ejected, close loss. The T-Wolves game, from which he got ejected in the opening couple minutes, close loss. This game against the Suns now, from which he got ejected, close loss. The games he's outright missed, the Warriors are 2-5 in. So that's an overall 2-8 record in games where Draymond is either unavailable or he takes himself out of the game too early because of an ejection. And it's just really sad to me because of what this is doing to Draymond's legacy. I am a huge fan of Draymond Green's basketball game. In my early adolescence, he was my favorite basketball player on the planet. I had a Draymond Green jersey. I think that he does so many great things that a large portion of basketball fans will just never fully appreciate because there's such an obsession with offensive skill and particularly one-on-one scoring, and Draymond is really inept there, right? He's got no bag whatsoever. For most of his career, he hasn't been able to shoot. He's not a super cool vertical athlete. He doesn't have crazy fluidity, but what he is an all-time defender. And really a one-of-one weapon in NBA history there, because how many other guys have been this elite as a perimeter defender and this elite as an interior defender? Maybe you could argue that Kevin Garnett is there, but this sort of versatility has, I think, changed how modern NBA defenses try to build their defenses. And he has captained a bunch of elite units there. And as I mentioned, like we just saw it in the title year, right? They were the number one defense by far when Draymond was healthy, and then they were 20-something in the games that he missed. Last year, I argued he should be Defensive Player of the Year, and that he was still the best defensive player on the planet, because they had the best defense in the league when he was on the floor again, and I think they were like somewhere in the mid-20s when he was off it. So that sort of impact, combined with what he has been able to do offensively, contributing to 4 NBA titles, arguably as the second best player on 2 of them. Like, he's just had such a fantastic basketball career. He was the second best player on the floor in a Game 7 in 2016 with LeBron James, the only guy who was better than him, Kyrie Irving, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. Like, he is never going to be fully appreciated for the basketball genius that he is. And doing more stuff like this is just going to continue to cement that legacy. Think about Sheed, man. What do people think about when they think of Rasheed Wallace?
Ball don't lie.
Well, ball don't lie, that's true. But even more so, I would say they think about a volatile personality, a guy who has the ejections record, a guy who has the single-season text record.
I mean, refs hated Sheed, though, man.
Well, listen, I'm not saying that that isn't part of who he was and his legacy. Refs did hate him, that's true. But of course, I mean, he was that kind of guy. He was a pugnacious fellow. But he was also an all-star level basketball player. He was an ahead of his time big man who had an incredible shooting ability, who was a really high-level post defender. And people don't talk about all-star Sheed. They talk about crazy man Sheed. And I just think that that is what Draymond is doing to himself, but to an even more dramatic extent, where people legitimately hate him. They hate him because I think of how great the Warriors have been, and because a lot of people don't understand his skill set, and they literally think that he is just riding coattails instead of being the second most important player in this brilliant, brilliant decade run. So that's what really bums me out. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to put him in his place on this team. Because this very well could lead to a second suspension of the year, bro. And the problem is that Draymond is the leader of this team. He has always been the vocal and emotional leader. Steph and Klay, they just don't have those sort of personalities. But now he's in a place where he's gone off the rails, and he is doing these things to the detriment of himself and of the team. And I don't know if the Warriors have that personality to really put him in line, because Steve Kerr, I think, is a great basketball coach. And I think he is awesome at managing personalities, but that's mostly by trusting his guys and often giving them a little bit of leeway because he knows they're great players and allowing them to be themselves. But you've now crossed a threshold where you just can't allow that. So it's disappointing. It's frustrating. This isn't 2016 where it's like, oh my God, should he have gotten suspended for kind of hitting LeBron in the nuts when the guy was stepping over him? No, I'm opposed to that when you're talking about those kind of basketball stakes. This is unprompted, unwarranted, completely excessive, and it's just indefensible.
The thing that I think is most frustrating about all this, Carson, is something about what you just mentioned is, you know, how much of a basketball genius Draymond Green truly is. And I don't just mean that defensively. You know, I mean, he's a really great offensive player, too, in terms of IQ, intelligence, you know, where the ball needs to go, what needs to happen defensively, positionally, where he needs to be. Like, you know, you talk about skill. Draymond may not be super skilled, but he's super smart, and that's what makes him a great player. It's just frustrating that a guy this smart, this basketball smart, this cerebral of a basketball player can't control his temperament, and it really is hurting this team. I do think you're right. I think somebody has to check him. If it's Wiggins, if it's Curry, if it's Clay, if it's Kerr, somebody's got to pull him aside and just get him straight. You know, get him aligned, man. I don't know who that guy is, but I don't know, man. I'm just worried that this is going to get worse because all of this, the common denominator is losing. And I don't know if this eventually reaches a boiling point. Does this get worse? Do other guys have frustrations? Because that's the cure-all. The cure-all in any sport, when you're having any drama, is winning games. And Dre is actively hurting them, and there's not really anything encouraging that's pointing to this team having a dramatic turnaround. So I don't know. I just don't want to see this get worse, but winning is the only thing that's going to cure these symptoms, these issues, man.
No, I think you're right. We can't just look at this and say that it's a coincidence when the Warriors are having their least successful basketball season with Steph Curry on the floor, and especially with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson on the floor. I mean, since those guys became who we know them to be. And I know there are those guys, and I believe Draymond is absolutely one of them. In fact, I think I've even heard him say this, who believe that you can really use an ejection or a tech as a rallying point for the team. And there's a moment where you need that little extra spike of energy, and so you're willing to take the hit on you personally to energize the team. But when you look at this year, those are just not the type of situations that we're dealing with here. Nobody's upset at Jusuf Nurkic. Nobody's going to unite against Jusuf Nurkic, who didn't do anything wrong. And you're just not at that stage of the game. Against the Timberwolves, like, actually, the Warriors did really play with some spunk after that. But is it worth, in a game where you're already down Steph Curry, getting both yourself and Klay Thompson, who would not otherwise have been ejected, that would have just been a tech? I believe if Draymond hadn't escalated the situation to that extent, is it worth getting both of you thrown out of the game and ultimately losing because you're at such a talent deficit? No, it's not. So there's no way to defend what Draymond is doing right now. And you're right. Like, they have to get back on track winning basketball games. And you know what's a good way to do that is for Draymond to actually stay out there on the floor. Because it turns out he has a massive, massive impact on winning that we've seen for years and years with this team. They just aren't the same without him.